The letter said I had 48 hours to correct violations I had never committed, detected by an AI system I had never agreed to, enforced by an HOA president who had never once stepped foot on my property, and if I failed, the fines would begin automatically every hour without appeal. I stood in my driveway rereading it while my phone buzzed with neighbors texting screenshots of their own notices. Mine was worse. According to the algorithm, my house did not exist. It started on a Tuesday morning, the kind where nothing feels dangerous yet. Sun was out, trash cans lined up like usual, sprinklers ticking across lawns that all looked exactly the same because that was the point of this place. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone chimed with an email titled Automated Compliance Alert. That alone made my stomach tighten. The HOA had never used words like automated before. Usually it was passive-aggressive notes or Linda knocking on doors like she owned oxygen. The email loaded slowly, which felt appropriate. It informed me that the association had launched a cutting-edge AI compliance verification system to ensure fairness, accuracy, and efficiency. Those words were bolded in my mind even if they were not on the screen. Then came the list. Unauthorized exterior modifications, improper vehicle storage, unapproved structural additions, obstructed easement, agricultural usage in residential zoning. Agricultural usage. I stared at that one for a long time. I live on the corner lot with an extended driveway. The most agricultural thing on my property was a tomato plant my neighbor kept stealing from. At the bottom of the email was a grainy overhead image, clearly taken from a drone or satellite, with a red box drawn around a structure that was not mine. The caption read violation location confirmed by AI. The structure in the box was a barn. I do not have a barn. I zoomed in. The roof was metal, the yard dirt, the driveway gravel. I recognized it immediately because it belonged to Mark, the guy 2 streets over who had bought an old undeveloped parcel and was in a quiet legal fight with the HOA about zoning. He lived near the tree line, not near me. His property had a private gate. Mine had a basketball hoop that was slightly crooked. The AI had flagged the wrong owner. At first I laughed. I actually laughed out loud in my kitchen. I assumed it would be fixed with a single reply email and a screenshot. I replied politely, attached photos of my actual house, circled my address on a map, and wrote there appears to be an error. The structure shown does not belong to me. I hit send and went to work. By lunch I had 3 more emails. Failure to acknowledge violation notice. Fine pending. Automated enforcement in progress. That was when my phone rang. Linda did not say hello. She never did when she felt powerful. She said the system shows non-compliance. I asked her what system. She said the AI. Like it was a person. Like it had opinions. I explained calmly that the AI was wrong. I told her whose barn it was. I told her where my house was. I offered to walk outside and FaceTime her so she could see it in real time. She told me the AI had 99.7% accuracy and human interference compromised integrity. That sentence made my skin crawl. I asked her how an algorithm could assign agricultural usage to a driveway with a Honda parked on it. She said the AI analyzes patterns. Barn roof. Soil texture. Shadows. I said it analyzed the wrong property. She paused, then said the system is locked once a violation is issued. Appeals are reviewed after fines are resolved. I asked her how much the fines were. She said $50 per hour. Per hour. I did the math in my head and felt lightheaded. This was not a mistake anymore. This was a machine backed by a woman who had waited years to stop pretending she was reasonable. I drove home early. By the time I pulled into my driveway, there was a bright orange notice taped to my mailbox. It listed the same violations, but now included failure to remove livestock infrastructure. Livestock. I stood there laughing again, but this time it came out sharp and wrong. A neighbor across the street peeked through her blinds like she was watching a nature documentary. I called Mark. He answered immediately because he was already furious. They flagged my barn as yours, he said. They sent me a warning too. But mine says duplicate violation already assigned. We compared screenshot. Same image. Same red box. Different addresses. The AI had split reality in half and punished us both. By evening, the HOA portal showed my balance climbing in real time. Every refresh added another $50. There was no button to dispute, only a countdown timer labeled compliance window remaining. I printed photos. I printed maps. I printed my property survey. I drove them to Linda's house because emailing into the void felt useless. She answered the door with her phone in her hand and a smile that did not reach her eyes. I held up the photos. She did not look at them. She said the AI is unbiased. I said it thinks I have a barn. She said the AI does not think. It verifies. I asked her who trained it. She said a vendor. I asked her if the vendor had ever been to our neighborhood. She said the data speaks for itself. I realized then that this was not about enforcement. This was about absolution. The AI meant she never had to be wrong again. I told her I would not pay fines for a structure I did not own. She said non-payment escalates automatically. I asked what escalation meant. She said liens, access restrictions, towing authorization, towing. I left before I said something that would get me arrested. That night, my driveway camera pinged every hour as the system logged non-compliance check. At midnight, the fines crossed into 4-digit. At 2 in the morning, a new violation appeared for failure to remove barn within compliance window. I sat in bed staring at my phone while the number climbed, realizing something very clear. The HOA had handed authority to a machine that could not be reasoned with, overseen by a woman who did not want it to be. And the machine had decided I owned a barn. If I did nothing, it would keep deciding things until my house belonged to it too. By morning the fines had passed a point where the number stopped feeling real. It was just digits refreshing like a stock ticker that only went one direction. I made coffee I did not drink and watched the HOA portal update every hour on the hour, precise and smug, as if the system was proud of itself for catching me still owning a barn that continued not to exist. At 8:30 a new email arrived announcing Phase 2 enforcement actions. The wording was cheerful, almost celebratory. To improve community compliance, automated physical verification would begin. No explanation of what physical meant. No option to opt out. Just a note reminding residents that obstruction of verification could result in additional penalties. I stepped outside and scanned the sky like an idiot. The neighborhood was unusually quiet. No kids waiting for buses, no dogs barking, just curtains twitching. Everyone had received notices. Mine just happened to be the most insane. My phone buzzed. Mark again. They sent someone to my gate at 6 this morning, he said. Some guy in a polo shirt with a tablet. He stood there taking pictures like he was cataloging wildlife. I asked what happened. Mark laughed once, sharp and bitter. He told me the guy said he was a compliance technician contracted by the AI vendor. Not the HOA. Not the city. The algorithm. Apparently the AI had flagged my address as the primary violation holder and Mark's as a secondary corroboration source. That meant I was the problem and his barn was just supporting evidence. I asked Mark what he planned to do. He said I am lawyering up. That word stuck with me. Lawyer. It felt heavy and expensive, and like something normal people did not have to consider over imaginary livestock. At 9 sharp, my driveway camera sent a motion alert. A white SUV with no markings rolled to a stop at the curb. A man stepped out holding a tablet and a handheld scanner that looked like it belonged in an airport. He wore a badge clipped to his belt that said Compliance Services. Nothing else. I walked outside before he could knock. He smiled like he had rehearsed it. Good morning. This will only take a moment. I asked him what he was verifying. He glanced at the tablet. Unauthorized agricultural structure. I told him again that I did not have one. He nodded without looking up. They always nodded. like saying words was just a formality before the machine decided what mattered. He lifted the scanner and aimed it at my house. The thing hummed softly, sweeping from roof to driveway to lawn. I asked him if he could see the barn. He said the AI already sees it. I asked him where. He pointed vaguely east. That direction contains several streets, a small park, and Mark's property near the trees. I told him he was scanning the wrong location. He said the coordinates are locked. I stepped closer and looked at his tablet. The map clearly showed a pin dropped 2 streets over, not on my lot. I pointed to it and said that is not my address. He frowned for the first time. He zoomed in, zoomed out, switched views. The pin stayed where it was. He said the system assigns ownership based on parcel data associations. I asked him if he knew what that meant. He hesitated. Then he said I just verify what the AI flags. I asked him to note in his report that the structure did not exist on my property. He tapped something, then stopped. The option to annotate was grayed out. He said I cannot override or comment. Only confirm presence or absence. I asked him which one he was about to confirm. He looked at the tablet again. The AI requires confirmation of continued non-compliance. I said that is not an answer. He sighed and finally looked at me, really looked like he was seeing a person instead of a checkbox. He lowered his voice and said off the record, "This thing has been wrong before. But if I mark absence, it triggers a secondary review that takes weeks. During that time the fines keep running." I asked what happened if he confirmed presence. He said enforcement accelerates. I asked him to leave. He said he could not without submitting a verification. I asked him what happened if I refused access. He said that counted as obstruction. So I stood there while a stranger confirmed the existence of a barn that was not there, because the alternative was worse. He left quickly after that, like he was embarrassed to be seen. Within minutes, the portal updated. Verification complete. Non-compliance confirmed. Another email followed immediately. Due to continued violation, access restrictions are now authorized. I did not know what that meant until my garage door refused to open. I stood inside pressing the button like it might suddenly obey. The motor clicked but did not engage. I tried the manual release. It was locked. My phone buzzed again. Linda. She sounded delighted. The system is working beautifully. I asked her if she understood that my garage was locked. She said access restrictions help motivate timely compliance. I asked her if she understood that the AI had assigned me someone else's barn. She said the AI does not assign. It verifies patterns. I asked her if she had personally checked. She said human review introduces bias. I told her this was insane. She said order feels insane to people who benefit from chaos. That was when something in me shifted. Fear burned off and left something colder. I opened my laptop and started digging. HOA board meeting minutes, vendor contract, public records, anything with the words automated or AI or compliance in it. Buried in a PDF from 6 months ago was a line item. Pilot program for automated enforcement using aerial imagery and parcel association modeling. Approved unanimously. The vendor name was small, almost hidden. And when I searched it, the first thing that came up was a class action lawsuit in another state. Wrongful liens. Misidentified properties. Automated escalation without human review. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time in 24 hours. The AI was not infallible. It was just fast. And Linda had built her authority on the assumption that no one would ever push back hard enough to slow it down. She was about to find out what happened when the wrong owner got flagged. By the 3rd day the fines had become background noise, like a clock ticking too loud to ignore but too steady to panic over anymore. I stopped refreshing the portal. I knew the number was climbing. Knowing the exact amount would not help me sleep or think. What mattered was control, and right now the HOA had all of it because I was still playing defense. I took the day off work and treated the situation like a problem that could be solved if I approached it the right way. Not emotionally. Not angrily. Systematically. The first thing I did was walk my property with my phone camera on, narrating everything out loud. I filmed the driveway, the lawn, the side yard, the fence line. I filmed the basketball hoop, the garden hose, the empty patch of dirt where grass never grew properly. I said the date and time. I said my address. I said there was no barn, no livestock, no agricultural structure, no equipment of any kind. It felt ridiculous, but I had learned that ridiculous documentation mattered when machines were involved. Then I drove to Mark's place. His property looked exactly like it always had. The barn sat back near the trees, metal roof dull in the sun, doors half open. It was quiet and legal in the way that only something built with permits and patience could be. Mark met me at the gate with a folder already in his hands. "They sent another tech this morning," he said. "Different guy. Same tablet." I asked what happened. He said the tech scanned the barn, confirmed it existed, then apologized for the confusion and said the primary violation holder would be notified. I asked who that was. Mark smiled without humor. "Still you." We sat on the tailgate of his truck and compared notes. His lawyer had already filed an injunction to stop enforcement on his property. Mine had not, because technically the HOA claimed nothing existed on mine except violations. That was when I noticed something strange. On Mark's copy of the violation notice, the barn was labeled structure type B17. On mine, the same image was labeled B17A. A suffix. A duplicate. The AI had not just misidentified the owner. It had forked the violation into two separate records to avoid contradiction. That detail made my chest tighten. This was not a simple error. This was a system designed to preserve its own correctness by multiplying blame. Back home, I logged into the HOA portal using an incognito browser and created a new account under my wife's name to see what a clean profile looked like. No violations. No warnings. Just a dashboard with a cheerful green checkmark that said community standing excellent. Then I opened my own account side by side. Red banners. Timers. Warning icons. Automated messages phrased like friendly threat. I clicked into the violation history and scrolled past the original notice. There were new entries now. Unauthorized structure expansion. Failure to remediate soil disturbance. Potential commercial activity detected. Commercial. I did not run a business. I worked from a laptop like half the neighborhood. That was when the doorbell rang. I checked the camera first. 2 men this time. One with a tablet. One with a clipboard. Behind them, Linda stood a few steps back, arms crossed, sunglasses on, smiling like she was supervising a photo shoot. I opened the door. Linda spoke first. "We are conducting an escalation review." I asked her if this was another automated process. She said hybrid. That word meant nothing, and she knew it. The man with the tablet asked for access to my backyard. I said no. Linda tilted her head. "Obstruction carries penalties." I said I was not obstructing. I was denying entry to private property without a warrant. She smiled wider. "HOA covenants allow inspection for compliance." I asked her to point out where it said she could bring contractors and lock my garage remotely. She waved a hand. "The AI manages enforcement." I asked the men if they could identify the barn on my property. The man with the clipboard hesitated. The one with the tablet looked at Linda, then back at me. "The AI associates this parcel with agricultural structures." I stepped aside and gestured to the open view of my yard. "Show me." They stood there. The scanner hummed again, sweeping empty space. The tablet beeped. Violation confirmed. Linda clapped her hands once. "There we go." Something snapped then. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a cable finally parting under tension. I told Linda I wanted the AI audit log. She laughed. "Residents do not have access to that." I told her I wanted the vendor contract. She said that is board confidential. I told her I had already read it. Her smile flickered. I told her about the lawsuit. About the duplicate structure IDs. About the parcel association error. The men shifted uncomfortably. The tablet guy stopped scanning. Linda's voice hardened. You are not qualified to interpret technical systems. I said neither are you. For the first time, she raised her voice. The system exists to protect the community. I said it exists to protect you from accountability. The clipboard guy cleared his throat and quietly said, Linda, the coordinates are off again. She shot him a look sharp enough to cut glass. He kept going. This address does not match the imagery source. It matches 2 streets east. Silence stretched. The scanner hummed uselessly. Linda recovered fast. Then the AI needs recalibration. Until then, enforcement stands. She turned to leave like that settled it. Before she reached the sidewalk, I said I was filing an emergency injunction. She laughed over her shoulder. Against an algorithm? I said against you. That night my garage unlocked without warning. No email. No notice. Just control returned like nothing had happened. An hour later, the portal updated again. Violation status under internal review. Fines paused. Not reversed. Paused. It was the first crack. And Linda knew it. The pause felt more unsettling than the fines ever had. Silence from a system that had been screaming at me non-stop for days was not relief. It was the sound a predator makes when it stops charging and starts circling. I did not celebrate. I documented. Every screen. Every timestamp. Every status change. I recorded the portal showing the fines frozen mid-climb like a heart monitor that had flatlined but not declared death. I recorded my garage opening normally. I recorded the lack of email explaining why any of it happened. At 10 in the morning, Linda called. Her tone had changed. No cheer. No smug certainty. Just clipped professionalism stretched thin. The board would like to speak with you. I asked if this was another hybrid process. She ignored that. There will be a special meeting this afternoon. You are invited to present concerns. Present concerns. As if I had come to complain about noise or paint colors, not algorithmic extortion. I agreed anyway, because now they were reacting. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a beige room that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and old coffee. I had never been inside before. Linda sat at the head of the table. 4 board members flanked her, all people who nodded a lot and rarely spoke at community events. A laptop sat open in front of her, glowing like a shrine. She began with a rehearsed statement about innovation, efficiency, and modern governance. I let her finish. Then I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not insult anyone. I walked them through the timeline slowly. The wrong image. The wrong parcel. The duplicate structure IDs. The automated fines. The locked garage. The verification contractor who confirmed something that did not exist because the alternative was worse. I showed them screenshots side by side. My house. Mark's barn. Same image. Different addresses. One board member leaned forward. That barn is not yours? I said no. Another asked why would the system think it is? I said because it was trained to prioritize certainty over accuracy. Linda cut in. The system is still in pilot phase. I looked at her. Then why did you allow it to issue liens? The room went quiet. One of the board members cleared his throat and asked what a lien was. That was when I realized something important. They had not known. Linda had not just handed authority to the AI. She had quietly expanded its reach without explaining the consequences. She had used complexity as camouflage. I asked if any of them had reviewed the vendor's escalation logic. No answer. I asked if any of them knew that fines increased hourly without appeal. One woman shook her head slowly. I asked if they knew that access restrictions included remote disabling of garage systems connected to HOA-approved smart devices. Linda stood abruptly. That feature is optional. I said it was used. The board member nearest her looked startled. Used how? I told them. Linda tried to regain control, speaking faster now, words stacking on each other. The AI flagged severe noncompliance. We had to act decisively. Manual review would have slowed enforcement. That was the moment the tone shifted. Decisively sounded a lot like recklessly when spoken out loud. I ended with one sentence. I said, if the system can be wrong about a barn, it can be wrong about anything. No one argued. The meeting ended with promises to investigate. Committees. Reviews. Linda left first, phone already pressed to her ear, walking quickly. That night, Mark called. My lawyer filed the injunction this afternoon, he said. Judge granted a temporary restraining order. Against the HOA. Against automated enforcement. Effective immediately. I felt something loosen in my chest that I had not realized was clenched. But relief did not last long. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed with a notification from the HOA portal. Violation status updated. Reclassified. I logged in. The barn violation was gone. In its place was a new one. Unauthorized data manipulation. Interference with compliance systems. Abuse of review process. I stared at the screen, half laughing, half furious. The AI had not admitted it was wrong. It had accused me of tampering with reality. And Linda had approved the update. I closed the laptop slowly and sat in the dark, understanding something very clearly now. This was no longer about a barn. It was about a machine that could rewrite guilt faster than truth. And a woman who would rather burn the whole neighborhood down than admit she let it do that. By morning the neighborhood knew. I did not announce anything. I did not post screenshots or send mass emails. The HOA did that for me by accident. The new violation showed up not just on my account, but briefly on the community activity feed before someone realized what it looked like and pulled it down. Unauthorized data manipulation. People started texting. Not asking if I was okay. Asking what that even meant. I woke up to 3 missed calls from neighbors I barely knew and 1 voicemail from a retired engineer down the block who sounded more amused than concerned. He said, I saw that thing about data manipulation. Call me. I think your AI is hallucinating. That word stuck. Hallucinating. Machines were not supposed to do that, but anyone who actually worked with them knew better. At 9 sharp my doorbell rang again. This time it was not contractors. It was a uniformed process server. He handed me a thick envelope, apologized reflexively, and walked back to his car before I could say anything. Inside was a formal notice from the HOA's legal counsel alleging that I had interfered with proprietary compliance systems and caused disruption to enforcement workflows. They were accusing me of hacking. I laughed once, loud, alone in my kitchen. Then I sat down because my hands started shaking. I had screenshots, logs, videos, but none of that mattered if the narrative shifted from mistake to sabotage. That was the oldest trick in the book. If the system was wrong, then the person pointing it out must be the problem. I called the number on Mark's lawyer's card. He answered like he had been expecting it. He told me to forward everything and say nothing publicly. He told me the HOA had already overplayed their hand. He told me Linda had made a mistake escalating while a restraining order was active. That part was new to me. The injunction Mark's lawyer had secured did not just pause enforcement on Mark's property. It applied to automated enforcement actions related to the disputed imagery source, the barn imagery, which meant reclassifying the violation instead of removing it was not just unethical. It was contempt. At noon, a black sedan parked outside Linda's house down the street. I watched from my window as 2 people stepped out, one carrying a briefcase, the other a laptop bag. They did not look like HOA volunteers. An hour later, my phone rang. Linda sounded different again. Not angry. Not smug. Tight. We need to resolve this, she said. I asked her how. She said the board is willing to dismiss the violations if you withdraw your claims. I asked what claims. She said the allegations of system error. I laughed this time without stopping myself. I asked her how a dismissed violation could coexist with a flawless system. She said you are being difficult. I said you accused me of hacking my own driveway. Silence stretched. Then she said quietly, "The vendor is threatening to terminate support." That was it. That was the crack widening into a fracture. The AI was not just her shield. It was her liability. And now it was turning on her. I told her my lawyer would be in touch, and hung up before she could say anything else. That afternoon the retired engineer from down the block came over. He brought a laptop and no small amount of glee. He showed me something the HOA portal was not supposed to show. Hidden request IDs embedded in the page source. Every violation had a hash. Every hash mapped back to an image and a parcel association. Mine mapped to the same source image as Mark's barn. Same timestamp. Same drone pass. 2 violations. 1 image. Forked responsibility. He explained it like he was explaining a magic trick. The system could not resolve conflicting inputs, so it duplicated records instead of correcting them. That way it never had to admit uncertainty. He smiled and said, "That is not intelligence. That is cowardice." By evening, the story had moved beyond our street. Someone leaked the screenshots to a local community forum. Someone else added the lawsuit link. Someone else pointed out the locked garage feature buried in the HOA Smart Integration Agreement. People were angry now. Not curious. Not amused. Angry. The board sent out a mass email trying to calm everyone down. It blamed a temporary calibration issue. It promised transparency. It promised human oversight. Linda's name was missing from the signature. At 10 that night, my portal updated again. All violations removed. Balance zeroed. No apology. No explanation. Just a clean green checkmark like nothing had ever happened. I took screenshots anyway. Because an hour later, a final email arrived. Notice of special board election. Effective immediately. Linda had not lost yet. But she was no longer in control of the machine. And machines, I had learned, were very dangerous when the person who taught them how to punish lost the ability to decide who deserved it. The special election turned the neighborhood into something I barely recognized. Lawns were still trimmed. Trash cans still lined up on Tuesdays. But underneath the routine, everyone was watching everyone else, like we had all realized at the same time that the rules were not as solid as we thought. The board scheduled the election for 3 weeks out. Long enough, Linda said in the email, to ensure a fair and orderly process. Short enough that people would still be confused, still tired, still hoping the problem would quietly disappear. It did not. Flyers started appearing on doors. Not official ones. Plain paper. No HOA logo. Just screenshots printed in black and white. Red boxes. Duplicate structure IDs. The phrase unauthorized data manipulation circled in ink like someone had tried to understand it and failed. People started stopping me on walk. Not to accuse. To ask. Did they really lock your garage? Is it true the fines were hourly? Can they do that to anyone? I answered honestly. I showed proof when they asked. I did not exaggerate. I did not editorialize. I let the system speak for itself. Linda did not. She sent out long emails full of jargon. She talked about innovation resistance and bad actors and the dangers of misinformation. She never once said the AI was wrong. She said it was misused. She never once said she approved the escalation. She said processes evolve. The vendors sent their own email 2 days later. It was addressed to the board but copied the entire community. They announced an immediate suspension of services pending internal review. They cited reputational risk. They cited breach of operational guidelines. They cited unauthorized use of enforcement features not included in the pilot agreement. That last part landed like a dropped plate. Unauthorized use. Linda had not just trusted the AI. She had pushed it beyond what she was allowed to. The retired engineer came by again that night, this time with 2 neighbors in tow. One was a software tester. The other worked in insurance compliance. They spread laptops across my kitchen table like we were planning something illegal, except all we were doing was reading contracts and logs. They found the clause Linda had ignored. Enforcement automation permitted only after human verification and owner notification with appeal access. None of that had happened. The insurance neighbor whistled softly and said if a lien had gone through, this would have voided half the HOA's coverage. That explained the sudden silence from the board. The first public forum was held the following Saturday. Standing room only. People sat on the floor. Someone live-streamed it from their phone. Linda stood at the podium alone. No laptop this time. No tablet. Just printed notes she barely looked at. She talked about her vision. About keeping property values high. About embracing the future. She talked for 15 minutes without saying barn, garage, or AI. Then questions started. A man asked why his driveway had been flagged for heavy equipment when he owned a pickup truck. A woman asked why her garden shed had triggered a soil disturbance alert. Someone asked if the system could flag pets next. Linda tried to deflect. She blamed calibration. She blamed early adoption pains. Then Mark stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not insult anyone. He held up one photo. The barn. He said, "This is mine." It was legal. It was permitted. And it nearly cost someone else their home. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Someone in the back asked who approved the system. All eyes turned to Linda. She said, "I did." Someone else asked who approved the escalation features. She hesitated. Too long. The room reacted before she answered. Not shouting. Worse. Murmurs. Laughter. Heads shaking. That was when the board chair finally spoke. He had been quiet for weeks, letting Linda absorb the heat. He said the board was not informed of several enforcement actions. Linda snapped her head toward him. He continued, including access restrictions and lien initiation. Linda said those tools were necessary. He said they were not authorized. The word hung there, ugly and undeniable. The vote happened that night, not weeks later. Emergency removal. Interim leadership. Suspension pending review. Linda tried to argue procedure. The room drowned her out with calls to vote. The result was not close. She walked out without looking at anyone. I thought that would be the end of it. It was not. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a notification from the HOA portal. New message from administrator. I opened it carefully. The AI compliance system had issued a retroactive correction notice. It stated that previous violations had been misattributed due to anomalous parcel association behavior. It also stated that corrective accountability measures were being applied to the source of misconfiguration. The source. I checked the attached document. Linda's address was listed. Violation type. Unauthorized system manipulation. Abuse of enforcement authority. Risk exposure to association. Fine schedule. Hourly. Automatic. No appeal listed. I sat back and let out a slow breath. The machine had finally been forced to choose between protecting its illusion of perfection and protecting the person who taught it how to punish. And it had done what machines always do. It followed the rules, even when they pointed inward. The first thing I felt was not satisfaction. It was disbelief. I refreshed the page 3 times, expecting the entry to vanish like everything else had when it became inconvenient. But Linda's address stayed there, highlighted in the same red banners I had memorized by heart. Timers ticking. Fine totals climbing. Automated language stripped of sympathy. The neighborhood noticed before I said a word. Someone posted a screenshot to the community forum within minutes. Someone else added a comment asking if it was real. A third person confirmed it by checking their own portal access permissions, which had quietly been expanded under the interim board. Linda had become visible to the same system she once hid behind. By noon, people were driving past her house slowly, not to gawk, but to confirm what they already suspected. There was no barn, no violation in sight. Just a perfectly ordinary home now branded as non-compliant by the same logic she had insisted was flawless. She did not come out. The interim board sent a carefully worded email acknowledging the correction notice. They emphasized that enforcement actions were automated and independent of individual leadership. They stressed that no one was above the system. It read like a confession without admitting guilt. That afternoon, Mark came over. We stood in my driveway watching the sun slide across houses that suddenly felt less permanent than they used to. "She called me last night," he said. I asked what she wanted. He shrugged. "She wanted to know if I thought this could be reversed." That word again. Reverse. As if harm was just a button. I asked what he told her. He smiled thinly. "I told her the system is locked." Linda did not handle it quietly. She showed up at the clubhouse the next morning demanding access, insisting there had been a misunderstanding, that the AI had been corrupted by outside interference. She blamed the vendor. She blamed the board. She blamed me by name. But she was no longer speaking from the podium. She was speaking from the floor. The interim chair reminded her that she was no longer authorized to access administrative tools. The compliance technicians she once summoned at will now treated her like any other homeowner. She asked for a manual review. They told her it would occur after fines were resolved. She asked for the audit logs. They told her residents did not have access to those. Someone in the room laughed. Not cruelly. Just once. Sharp and involuntary. That was when it broke. She shouted that the system was wrong. That it had misunderstood intent. That context mattered. That humans needed discretion. Every argument she made was one she had dismissed when I made it. The room did not shout back. It did not need to. The silence was enough. Within days, her fines crossed into the same territory mine had. 4 digits. Then 5. Her garage access was restricted. Her smart irrigation shut off. Her driveway camera stopped syncing. She unplugged things in frustration, not realizing that doing so triggered more alert. Unauthorized tampering. Failure to maintain compliance devices. The AI adapted faster than she could. A local reporter picked up the story after someone tipped them off. The headline did not name her, but it did not need to. Everyone knew. HOA embraces AI enforcement, then learns who it really serves. The vendor issued a final statement distancing themselves from implementation decisions. The insurance company opened an inquiry. The city requested documentation. Linda stopped coming outside altogether. One evening, as I was taking out the trash, I saw her standing in her darkened living room, phone pressed to her ear, face lit by the glow of a screen she could not control anymore. For a moment I felt something like pity. Then I remembered my garage door refusing to open, the fines ticking upward, the accusation of hacking my own life. Pity passed. The AI issued one more update that week. System optimization complete. Human override protocols reinstated. Confidence threshold adjusted. It did not apologize. Machines never do. But it had learned. And so had we. The neighborhood was quieter now, not because people were afraid, but because something fragile had been exposed. Authority without accountability was just automation with a smile. Linda had taught the system how to punish. She just never expected it to remember. By the time the election results were finalized, the neighborhood felt like it had exhaled after holding its breath for months. The interim board won unanimously. Not because they were popular, but because they promised something radical. Boring. Manual review. Human signatures. A rule that said if you could not explain a violation to a neighbor's face, you could not enforce it at all. The AI system was shut down that same afternoon. Not paused. Not recalibrated. Shut down. The portal went dark for an hour, then came back online stripped of red banners, timers, and confidence scores. Violations were now listed in plain language. No predictions. No automation. Just words and a button that said request review. People clicked it like they did not trust it yet. Linda's account disappeared from the administrator list. Her violations did not. They lingered for another week, while the board worked with lawyers to unwind the damage. Fines were frozen. Access restrictions lifted. The system that had once moved faster than thought now moved at the speed of meetings and signatures. She moved out quietly. No announcement. No goodbye email. A moving truck arrived early one morning and was gone by noon. Someone said she had sold at a loss. Someone else said she was fighting the fines in arbitration. No one knew for sure, and no one really wanted to. The barn remained where it always had, legal and unchanged. Mark won his zoning dispute 2 weeks later. The judge cited procedural abuse and reliance on unverified automated enforcement. He smiled when he said it, like it was a lesson he enjoyed teaching. The HOA paid Mark's legal fees. They paid mine too. The retired engineer came by one last time to help me uninstall the HOA integrations I no longer trusted. We disconnected the garage, the camera, the smart locks. The house felt quieter without constant pings and checks, like it had reclaimed something private. I kept one thing: the screenshots. Not because I needed them anymore, but because they reminded me how quickly certainty could be manufactured when no one was allowed to ask how. At the first community meeting under the new board, someone suggested bringing back AI for minor issues. Parking time limits, trash cans, low-risk stuff. The room went still. Then someone laughed. Gently. Not mocking. Just aware. The chair wrote "no automation" without appeal on the whiteboard and underlined it twice. That became the rule. Life returned to normal in small ways. Kids on bikes. Dogs barking. Lawns slightly uneven. The basketball hoop still crooked. No barns appeared on my driveway. Sometimes I think about how close it came. How a system designed to be efficient almost erased the difference between reality and convenience. How a person who wanted control found it in a machine that never said no. And how that machine, once exposed to rules it could not bend, turned inward and did exactly what it was told. The HOA never apologized. They did not have to. The story spread on its own. In other neighborhoods, other boards, other towns quietly reconsidering their own shiny enforcement tools. All it took was one wrong owner getting flagged, and refusing to disappear quietly. Now when I pull into my driveway and the garage door opens the way it should, I pause for a second longer than I used to. Not out of fear. Out of memory. Because I know how easily a red box can be drawn around the wrong life, and how important it is to make sure someone is still allowed to erase it.